Hi, my name is Geeta Chandalia, and I'm the marketing director for McGraw Hill from the UK, Ireland, and Northern and Central European region. And I'm thrilled today to welcome you to our Evolving Higher Education Conference. As members of the higher education community for over 130 years, we're here to discuss core issues that are representing that evolving face of higher education. And of course, we can't do or have this conversation without you taking part in that. So please feel free to drop any questions that you might have in the Q&A, or if you'd like to share any thoughts as we're talking through, share any links to anything, feel free to drop those in the chat. And of course, if you've got time outside of the sessions, either before or after them, feel free to visit our team who will be in the booths, who'd be more than happy to talk to you about how we can also work with you to support you in your outcomes. And before we do get going with our first session, I just wanted to share that we won't have a live Q&A at the end of this session, but we will be available in the Q&A if you've got any questions specifically for us. And if there are any questions that you want to ask specifically that are burning questions for Simon, we'll make sure that he's able to come back to you after all the sessions conclude. So without further ado, let's move towards our first session, which is both an honour and a privilege for myself to be joined here today by our CEO, Simon Allen, who's actually been part, or a very integral part, of our industry for many, many, many years. And it's an absolute pleasure to be able to have him join us today. So hi, Simon. Welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I'm going to let you tell everybody a little bit about yourself. I think most people will know you or have heard of you at some point. So I'll let you take it away on how you started your journey with us in higher education.
Thank you, Geeta. Thank you. I'm almost embarrassed. Honor and a privilege it is for me to be joining you and talking to the group today. I've been around, you said years, it's actually decades. I've been in this wonderful industry across higher education for 37 years. On August the 16th, it'll be my 37th anniversary. Who's counting? Which means it's nearly 4 decades of working across higher ed. I began as a sales rep actually in Dallas, Texas. Don't be confused by the accent. That's a long story. But I joined what is now part of McGraw Hill back in 1986, and as a rep for 3 years, then as a sales manager for 7 years, and what have you, really across the US initially, which is a good space really to begin one's knowledge of the higher education area, because it's a very distinct way of teaching and learning across US higher education. It's very homogeneous across the country with different courses. And then I spent time, a number of years in Europe, Middle East, Africa, as you know, building the business there, then across Asia Pacific, and then Latin America, and all of the international segments, and then back including all of the US again. So over 37 years, it's funny just looking at the list of countries from everyone that's joining us today, and I count 30 countries, and I'm proud to say I've been calling on every one of them apart from one, which is Cuba. I still need to get to Cuba, but every other country that's joining us today from various institutions, I've in some cases many dozens of times, obviously not just in the UK, but also all over the rest of Europe, Asia. We've got some Australia, I think, colleagues, South Africa, some Latin American, and of course in North America too. So I like to think I've got a bit of knowledge around higher education, and I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Oh, that's amazing. When you sum it up in 37 years, that's an extremely long time, and you've probably seen so much change, evolve, over the years, and the different regions as well, who are all at different parts of their journey in higher ed. And I guess for everyone who's probably most interested, what do you feel you love most about being in this industry? What's that real sort of the thing that keeps you in it and with it? What's that for you?
It's a great question. I mean, to me, and I've said this to you before, Gator, and to our staff, once you're in it for 3 years, if you're in it for 3 years, you get hooked. It's very hard to leave this industry. And I think for those people listening in that have been teaching for a good long while, there are frustrating days, there are frustrating years, semesters, terms, whatever. But fundamentally, when you get hooked onto education as a career, be it from an
Yeah.
education company perspective like McGraw Hill, or from a teaching perspective
Hmm.
like all of the institutions we're talking with today, you do get
Hmm.
a passion for learning. You get a passion for
Yeah.
delivery of education, how you deliver it, how you present in a way that you know you're getting through to the student. Every year, every semester is a different group of students. How do you
Yeah.
re-energize
Absolutely.
yourself again after nearly four
Hmm.
decades? That's not easy, but
Yeah.
there are certain
Yeah.
aspects of
Yeah.
the industry that are so engaging that you just want to be a part of, that you get hooked.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
wonderful. I always say it's a very noble business, because what we're trying to do is help educators and students both. And of course, educators are there to try and help their students learn and improve their
Hmm.
possibilities for life. It's a critical, very important role that we all have.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I have to say, I think I crossed the maybe the second year. It is something that you're just hooked
Yeah.
into, just being part of this every day, and in the trenches with the academics, talking about how do we improve, the learning of the students. I think, yeah, once you're hooked, you're very much in, and I can attest to that. It's 13 years this
Yeah.
January, so it's been a journey, but I really love it. It's a really important part of the world and the business, education. So it's lovely to hear what sort of your main drivers are. And I guess the main threads of this conference is to talk about like the future facing almost landscape. But what notable trends have you seen in your 37 years that really stuck out to you as prominent movers in higher education? Which were the sort of biggest developments that you've seen over your time?
I think, and I promise, Geeta, we can't make this, we can't make people sit through
Yeah,
what will end up being a commercial of McGraw Hill. So I'm not going to do that. And we
of
shouldn't
course.
do that, because we should
Yeah,
talk about the industry
no.
generally. But what has been the
Uh-huh,
most
uh-huh.
significant change has been the transition from when I was a rep selling purely textbooks with what were transparency acetates, if people remember those,
Hmm.
which were
I
micro
remember those.
tests on either 3.5 inch or 5.25 inch discs, which was a test bank. And they were
Oh, yeah.
humongous, great big paper instructors manuals and study guides. Now,
Yes.
that was back in 1986. Now we refer to the same authorship. If I think of a number of our books in
Hmm.
the business disciplines, management, in biology, in the humanities, in the life sciences, in
Hmm.
every case now we are talking about a digitally delivered product. In fact, what may
Yeah.
surprise your listeners is fully 86% of our higher education business is now digital. When I began nearly 4 decades ago, of course, it was zero. If you count microtest, people shoving diskettes into their humongous, great big desktops, then of course it would be slightly more, but not really. The
Yeah.
transformation has been enormous in the last, and particularly in the last decade, where if I look to where we
Yeah.
were just 7 years ago, higher education has doubled in its presence as
Hmm.
far as
Hmm.
digital delivery. So now the vast
Absolutely.
majority of our customers around the world, they want everything delivered through Connect, our platform that we use in higher
Hmm.
education worldwide. They may use Alex
Yeah.
for our maths and chemistry material. And they want a lot more than just what was in a textbook, because what we're now
Yeah.
providing is all the brilliant content, all the great content that everyone has relied on through our brand for over a
Hmm.
century. But we now
Hmm.
provide all of the instruction material. We provide adaptive learning. In other words, personalized learning possibilities through a
Yeah.
bunch of wonderful assessment material, all of which is
Yeah.
tagged and linked directly to the content. So now what you have is
Hmm.
what we call courseware. It's no longer textbook, it's
Yeah.
courseware delivered through a
Hmm.
platform where 86% of our customers prefer to receive it
Yeah.
that way digitally. There are a few that prefer to use books, and we'll always provide that. We can print on demand as we need to. But the vast
Hmm.
majority of instructors, of professors, and students want to receive their material digitally. We're very happy to do that. That's been the biggest shift.
Yeah.
And it's a great shift, Geeta, because really what it means is you can now do so much more with your class. It isn't just a print textbook that you're talking
Hmm.
to and talking around,
Yeah.
you've got gamification, you've got your favorite links, your favorite videos that you can embed into that great content. The content is still there, but then you've got all the
Hmm.
assessment material again tagged so you can personalize the learning, make sure you're tracking how students are performing, and all of the additional
Yeah.
PowerPoint material and your own cases that instructors and professors may wish to use. So the flexibility of teaching now is very, very different than it was 37 years ago.
Absolutely. I think that's summed it up in a nutshell, that the digital transformation is one of the most significant milestones that's happened to this industry in so many years. And I too remember a time where we were kind of in a little bit of hybrid mode between print and
Yeah,
digital. I still have some of the discs and the
yeah,
DVDs of some of the videos, because
yeah,
there was still a time, only 10 years ago, 11
yeah,
years ago, that we still
yeah.
had some of that in the market. So it's definitely a
It's
time
a good
that
point.
we
It's
remember, but
actually worth
yeah,
pausing on that because it's a great point that
yeah,
we were waiting for this for a
yes,
long time. We first launched our Connect platform nearly 20 years
that's
ago.
it.
And there has been a
Yes.
long process of adoption,
Hmm.
of appreciation, I
Yeah.
think, from faculty across the
Hmm.
globe.
Hmm.
Obviously, there were the early
Yeah.
adopters that loved it and saw the benefits quickly, but many waited. And I think we're now what we've
Yeah.
called in the last couple of years at the inflection point, where our digital
Hmm.
growth,
Hmm.
particularly in higher education, is far higher than our print
Absolutely.
decline. So, from a business point of view,
Yeah.
it's good news for us. I think it's taken a
Yeah.
long while, and Geeta, longer than you and I would have imagined. I think we believed we would
Yeah.
have been at this stage fully 8 to 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
But we're here now,
Yes.
and I don't think there's any way it will go
Yeah.
back. COVID certainly accelerated for a segment at the top
100%.
end. But frankly, that
Hmm.
trajectory of change of learning style was well underway and has
Yeah.
been well underway, particularly for the last
Yeah.
7 to 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point around the acceleration that happened through the pandemic and post-pandemic, really, because people got used to the fact that we can achieve learning online. Yes, an element of face-to-face is 100% needed, but technology can really help enhance, and it's been a slow burn for many, many years to get people to be able to do that, for our infrastructure to allow that. So it's been a huge shift. And I guess, and having been in the business, I know that we did a tremendous amount of work through the pandemic to help people online. But how do you sort of see our role now that pandemic's kind of over? It's not fully over. It's out there still, but people have now returned back to face to face. So how have you sort of seen our work change? With the universities now to take them through the next phase post-pandemic era. They've had a bit of taste of online, and some people are still on the fence a little bit maybe, and others are like, no, this is the way to go. So how have you seen sort of our work shift as a business?
I think we've seen a significant shift and what I would call a
Mm.
um, a level of stickiness now, where instructors, some of them were not forced, but certainly deeply encouraged to get more into digital
Yeah.
delivery of learning because of COVID. Many were forced when everything was shut down for that first terrible semester towards the end of that spring of 2020 semester. People were forced in, and we spent, all of us, as you remember, we spent all of our energy helping faculty transform their courses onto our platform. A lot of them realized then just how effective as a teaching method it is to then work through Connect and have students work through onto our platform through the institution's learning management system. They can see the value of the delivery, the flexibility, again, the way the assessment is done. But it does take a change of style, and it's the sort of change that needs to bed in for a few semesters, really at least a year. And I think we found that when faculty have been through Connect and used it for a year, they really do see it as the only way to go. And if they're teaching a principles course and then the next semester they're teaching an intermediate course or an advanced course, which be it management, economics, biology, doesn't matter. Once they get used to the platform, they want to stay with it because they can see the efficacy of the student
Yeah.
performance and the way they teach, which is powerful. But I think one thing, and again, this cannot be a commercial from McGraw Hill, we need to think broadly about
No.
education since that time. And I've
Mm-hmm.
spent a lot of time on campus in the last 6, 8 months. And what I'm hearing more and more from faculty is a real anxiety about the quality of students, freshman students, first year students they have coming in,
Yeah.
where there is
Mm-hmm.
a real change in behavior, of learning behavior, of motivation, of preparation
Yeah.
for them to enter into the
Mm-hmm.
classroom. I was at a university, I won't say which one, it doesn't matter, in California a couple of months ago. And speaking to a professor, she was teaching majors biology courses she'd done for about 30, 32 years. We were reminiscing over the
Wow.
decades. And she said she has never witnessed a freshman year coming in, this was from last August, coming in, that
Mm-hmm.
have been as ill prepared as they are today, and as frankly unmotivated as they are today, where her biggest challenge
Yeah.
to get them to read anything. It doesn't matter if it's digital, print, anything. How does she get them
Yeah.
to be engaged with the class? How does she get them
Yeah.
excited to be in university? How does she make
Mm-hmm.
sure that
Mm-hmm.
not only do they go through the course that she's teaching, but that they stay in school
Yeah.
and then they continue in
Yeah.
prior years to go up in her case, the biology curriculum, because that's really
Mm-hmm.
what the university is about. She described it to me as saying that
Absolutely.
it's so different the way she has to think about teaching today than it ever has been. And it's way more than
Wow.
simply the content and the material and the platform that's in use. How do you get to that
Yeah.
student? How do you keep the students engaged and motivated? It's a
Mm-hmm.
real challenge now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I can attest, having also been on campus of late, and some of the academics were talking about, just it's just so different to engage a group of students who also have come potentially either from having done either an A level before, which was fully remote. Some of them may have not done exams for a long time, or done things in controlled conditions. So just doing that, the basics, they've almost come away from that, or they've listened to lectures online. So why would I come in? What's the need for me to come in if I can do this online? But there's this whole campus experience that has changed. And also, for academics, a lot's changed because they're not used to seeing each other either anymore. So actually, when we're going in to see a lot of them, they're coming in for their teaching and heading home, or there's still a lot of virtual delivery that's happening. So definitely the lot's shifted. And you hit the nail on the head actually about one of the next areas I was going to talk about, which is students, and the student voice, which is particularly in like the UK region, we've seen that student voice become more prominent. As with changes that we had with fees, the experience. Obviously, we had pandemic. A lot of students sort of questioning the value of being at university, and really, wanting to see value for what they're doing. So that voice is becoming more prominent. But also, through that, we're seeing a lot of challenges, with students struggling with their mental health and their well-being. That's definitely something that's, I think, all universities are very, very concerned about, because there are growing statistics around, students. Like I think they say 1 in 4 students, in the UK are disclosing a mental health condition at the moment at university, and they do have this real fear of failing because they're not comfortable with failing. And a lot of our academics actually talk about this, trying to cultivate this environment of a freedom to fail. So I guess what's how do you feel McGraw Hill sort of supporting institutions with this challenge? Because student success and well-being is obviously at the core, of a university strategy. But how are you seeing McGraw Hill support institutions across the world, I guess?
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack in that. And if you start with what you
Yeah,
were initially saying about
yeah,
the ability of students to get into their institution
hmm,
and to be motivated, as we were saying, um, there is a
yes,
significant change, as I've said, in how that's transpired. The main issue is, and the key word I think is anxiety. There is a level. It's
yeah,
beginning, maybe. I hope, I'm an optimist, so I would say this, but I think it's beginning to dissipate now. But certainly over the
yeah,
last year, from when I think about going back on campus properly from the very beginning of 22,
Mhm.
there was massive anxiety on campus, Geeta, and you could see
Yeah.
it in
Yeah.
faculty, the mask issue, of
Yeah.
course, the continued
Absolutely.
issues around distancing. How did they think about
Mhm.
teaching
Mhm.
students from a faculty point of view, who are by definition, sometimes a lot more senior and certainly older
Yeah.
than their student base? They've got to be worried about their own safety. This was certainly true a year ago. I do believe it's dissipated now. So there was
Mhm.
anxiety from the
Mhm.
teaching community. Um, there
Yes.
was definitely, and there has been, and I would argue, and I agree with you, there still is a change in student behavior, how students communicate
Absolutely.
with one another, how students communicate with faculty, where they often don't. A lot of the communication is now remote. The incidence of
Mhm.
faculty holding office hours and keeping their office hours physically is less and less. Increasingly,
Yeah.
as I walk around hallways in campuses around the world, there are closed doors and there are hallways that are
Yeah.
very, very empty, and there are office hours
Mhm.
posted with no faculty there because there are no students that
Yeah.
want to come in and knock on the door. Again, it's beginning to change now, but it's been a long,
Yeah.
slow, fairly tortuous process. I think
Yeah.
what that means is that the learning loss that everyone experienced, be it during the A level years or if you go back into GCSEs, some of those now have just about finished A levels. They will be first year freshman
Yeah.
students coming in September, October. And
Mhm.
there are different ways of behaving now than there used to be. And I think we need to reflect
Yeah.
that. And I do believe very clearly that we have an obligation as a company to help that process. So, your second part of the question,
Mhm.
what are we doing about that? And there are a
Yeah.
bunch of things that we've worked on, not only in how we think about product delivery. If you're a life science
Mhm.
student, what we've done with virtual labs to make sure students can create their lab courses fully online without needing to be in a lab.
Mhm.
That was necessary a year ago.
Mhm.
It's dissipated now. How do we think about allowing professors to go through their courses in the way that they've
Mhm.
designed them over the term or the semester to make sure that students
Yeah.
can complete the journey? That's what we've provided through all of our
Yeah.
tagging and content material that we put onto Connect, so we can make sure that
Mhm.
every course that they're taking is true to the curricula that the professor and the institution desires. So when they have their end
Yeah.
of term exams, we know that they're being examined in the right ways. We also know,
Mhm.
Gita, that it is the genuine student that is the one taking the test, taking the exam, because through
Yeah.
Proctorio, we've got a partnership, as you know, with Proctorio that allows us to make
Mhm.
sure we can identify that it is indeed the correct student taking the exam remotely, just as we are talking today. We can make sure that we can
Yeah.
identify that that student is the right one as we go through the answers
Mhm.
that he and she are providing. That's a big value add to faculty, that they can be sure that what they are doing works and whom they are testing absolutely is the right person. We're making sure that the material we provide is delivered in a way that students can study at their own pace. That's very
Yeah.
different than a traditional lecture. If you think about the ability to capture the
Mhm.
material that has been provided in a lecture through the LMS and the institution, the student has the opportunity to go back, because almost all of them are recorded.
Mhm.
They can go back and listen at their own pace. They can fast forward if they have no problems, but they can then wait and pause if they are struggling with a certain concept. This means
Mhm.
that when you think about the way that we now assess the students through our Connect platform and through SmartBook as the mechanism that we use, the way that we assess students allows the professor to identify who is doing well and who is struggling. This means
Yeah.
that the professor can recognize where there are problems, where there are concepts that have not been understood, or where students are just falling behind. And it gives the instructor the chance to intervene quickly to find out you didn't get a good understanding of game theory. If you're thinking about principles of
Mhm.
economics, you didn't understand asymmetric information if you're looking at intermediate micro. You didn't understand CAPM, capital asset pricing model, if you're doing corporate finance. Any number of different courses, whatever it is that you have studied, we can
Mhm.
identify and help the instructor realize where there are problems. So we can encourage them to go
Yeah.
back and say, 25% of you didn't get this concept. Let me redo it. You couldn't do that back in the
Mhm.
day with a simple textbook. You had to wait till the test results, and by then it was too late. By then you'd lost them.
Yeah.
Now you can make sure you track the progress in a personalized way during the semester,
Mhm.
recognize where there are problems. This is only possible through using our platform. And again, why the uptake and the interest and excitement of our platforms are so valuable, because it gives you that insight into student performance and the ability to make changes where you need to much earlier on.
Mhm.
Last thing I'll say, Geeta, on this is it's why, and again, efficacy
Yeah.
needs to be all over this. It's why that we
Mhm.
know that students that have gone through this process will
Yeah.
usually get 2 letter grades improvement if they go through their course using Connect,
Mhm.
using the material that we provide with the professor's guidance and oversight. They will get 2 letter
Yeah.
grades improvement if they do that. That's a great outcome. That's
Mhm.
a really good and important statistic to help students through the process and in help professors through the journey too. It's
Yeah.
very, very valuable.
Absolutely, absolutely. And looking at sort of like just the grade improvement that helps build their confidence, and start to alleviate some of those early anxieties. And I think there's definitely a term, that when you were saying it's like the early intervention stage that
Yes.
a lecturer can have to be able to intervene with those students who are showing signs of struggling, particularly with course content. And obviously, McGraw Hill have, a partnership with the JED Foundation, and also developed a number of sort of well-being modules which have been plugged in to our core platform. I wonder if you can sort of share a bit more about that for some of our audience who may not know that we have this at the moment. So I wonder if you could share a little bit more.
Yeah, happy to. It's an important issue. It actually began, Geeta, with
Yeah.
what we were doing in the primary, really in the secondary school level,
Hmm.
a couple
Hmm.
of years back, where the incidence of self-harm, of suicide, is has just risen significantly, and the
Hmm.
anxiety levels that students are feeling are real.
Mm.
And we began to partner with the JED Foundation a few years ago, and their mission is all
Yeah.
around preventing adolescent suicide and really making sure that the children and young adults have the ability and, if you like, the self-awareness to recognize when help is needed, and parents and instructors, their teachers, also recognize when a student may be at risk. And we provide a lot
Hmm.
of our secondary education material with specific thoughts about when a teacher might want to get more engaged, what the warning
Hmm.
signals that they need to think about and look for in their
Yeah.
student behavior. And of course, that carries through big time into higher education to the audience that we have today.
Absolutely.
And
Hmm.
um, we've really worked very hard to make sure that we're providing professors with individual pressure points that they may think about as they're
Hmm.
teaching certain elements of the course, the ability to stop
Yeah.
and check and just think about how are the students feeling about the courses that they're taking. And again, we mentioned anxiety, and you're quite right. You mentioned the issue of going through the testing process. By virtue of using our platform, and the ability for us to personalize that learning as we go through the assessment elements, it allows students to really relax a little bit more, because if there are elements of failure, we can address that sooner than when they actually have to
Hmm.
declare a grade at the end of the semester. They can
Yeah.
self-check themselves. There are various ways that they can do their own self-study materials and reach out for
Hmm.
help again at their own pace and in their own way when they know they need guidance. So we're trying
Yeah.
to just augment the material we provide for the instructors and the professors, and also for students
Hmm.
to make sure that there isn't an awareness of when they need to reach out for help. we also need to make sure that we retain these students. We don't want students to drop out. That's not good for anybody. It's not good for
Obviously.
society.
Yeah.
And let's be
Yeah.
honest, a lot of people talk to me about, ESG components for McGraw Hill as a
Yeah.
company. And I say to them, there is no bigger S, society, than an education company and what McGraw Hill is all about and our mission. And that mission includes making sure that we help students and their professors work in a way that will be as beneficial as possible and recognize any mental health issues, and making sure that they have
Yes.
more chances to succeed and fewer chances to fail. That's a core goal
Yeah.
for us. How do we help that success? How do we work in a way that will give students a much better chance to succeed as they go through their entire 3 or 4 years during their university and
Yeah.
college time?
Absolutely. And this is what sort of like this, having this conversation with you, I don't think we would have had this conversation probably. I look back to when I started at McGraw Hill, like student success, I think it's always been at the heart of what we do. But being able to talk about how we can now support and be part of that to support the education community, or obviously at the coal face of this, is pretty remarkable. So no, thank you for sharing. And our next area, I guess, is a big buzz area around affordability, equitability. All these areas are becoming and are, cornerstones of the education community. A lot around providing affordable access to our learning resources, whether that's to a student, to an institution, and obviously making sure that we're inclusive of all the communities that we serve in. And obviously in UK Northern Europe, we serve a multitude of communities. Just in the UK alone, there's so many communities that we now have. So I wonder if you could talk to some of the measures that you feel like McGraw Hill are addressing, because I know these are they're quite big areas and it's quite sizable. So I guess in terms of highlights, it'd be good to hear sort of like some nuggets of where you feel McGraw Hill is working in these areas.
Yeah, no, happy to. And as I'm looking at some of the individuals joining us today, and there are a fair number from my old alma mater from Middlesex. And when I was there, it was Middlesex Poly, it's now Middlesex University. But I remember very clearly what I could and could not afford, particularly the latter, to buy in terms of helping me get through my degree then. And that has, if anything, got worse than better, Geeta, over the years. And if I think now, there are various studies across, particularly the US, but there are individual trade studies around the world in different countries. But if you look at the National Association of College Stores, that body in the States, NACS, and the student survey body, they estimate around 35% reduction in the price of courseware over the last 4 or 5 years. It's a significant decline. And it needed to be, Geeta. We, I think, as an industry, did a disservice going back over 30 odd years, where we were pricing too much into individual products, print books, for various reasons. And I think it got to a level that was just unsustainable. And you've seen prices tumble since those days. And they needed to. And really the key issue, and people say to me, well, how can you afford that as a company? We're doing very well, as you know, at McGraw Hill. And let me give a bit of an answer to that, because it'll help the context. Why are lower prices good for us? The answer is because more students will use our material. It's very simple. It's a volume situation where back in the day, when you were a rep too, Geeta, certainly when I was, only 35% of students would actually buy the print textbooks, 35% of the class. And that meant that professors were teaching to students, and that number varies, but it was even lower in the UK, slightly higher in parts of Northern Europe, particularly where, if you look at Scandinavia and the Netherlands, where English is not the first language, the sell-through rates were a little higher there, not massively, but somewhat higher. But again, lower in some markets like the UK and India and parts of the Middle East. But if you think about that average of 35% through a textbook material, the professor is teaching a group where she cannot be sure what is actually being used by their students. How do you go through the process? How do you assess that class if barely a third of students are using what you expect them to use? Now, you
Mhm.
fast
Mhm.
forward a few years, if you look at where we are today, we know that through delivering our courseware through our platform, through Connect, we are seeing between 86% and 93% sell through, depending on the discipline. And that is an extraordinary increase in the number of students actually using our material. The best example
Mhm.
of that would be, again, in the US and now also mostly in Canada, through a model called
Yeah.
inclusive access. And inclusive
Mhm.
access exists by another name in the UK and in the Middle East and in Australia and in pretty much every country. It is literally where the
Mhm.
institution has a mechanism where the student can buy, in the same way that they may pay their fees, they can buy the courseware material. And in the US, they can buy it in a way where it may qualify for financial aid if that student qualifies for
Mhm.
financial aid. The deal
Yeah.
is that it's purchased through the university's LMS, their learning management system, or if they don't have one, through McGraw Hill Connect directly. And the deal is that we must make sure in the US by law that we provide this material at the lowest available price. And this is a significant discount, sometimes as much as 70% off a print, what used to be a print textbook. Um, but
Mhm.
by doing this, what we are doing is significantly increasing the number of students that buy. Again, you're looking at sell through up into the high 80s, 90 on average. That means that if you're
Mhm.
teaching the
Mhm.
course, and pretty much everyone listening to us today is a professor,
Yeah.
and that means that they know that 9 out of 10 of their students are using the material that they need them to use
Mhm.
to succeed in the course. So if you're testing to that group and you know that 90% roughly have bought the material, you know that you've got a good average of students that are going to be using and testing through the processes in the way you've designed the
Mhm.
course to be delivered.
Mhm.
That's a big plus, and it gives surety to the instructor. It also gives surety and again reduces anxiety to the student because
Yeah.
they know that if they're buying this material, they know that that's what their professor is going to be using throughout their course, be it the full term semester or a full year course. And they've got that
Mhm.
certainty that they're using the material that they will be tested to. And let's be honest, they want to make sure that they study and they focus on working through the exams to get the grade they need to get to continue on their process. So by
Yeah.
providing material in this way, it's giving us the ability to significantly reduce costs, the price the student needs to pay, because it's significantly
Mhm.
increasing the number of students that will purchase. That's good news for everyone involved because we need more students to use the materials that we have. It means that they would do better with their studies. Again, we've got efficacy studies to
Mhm.
show that there's often two letter grade improvement. Plus,
Yeah.
we've got the surety that the student is more likely to retain the information, go on to study further material, and
Yeah.
stay in the institution. It's a really virtuous cycle of improvement. This I gave a lot of US examples, Geeta, but if I think about what we do in the UAE right now, where the vast
Yeah.
majority of all of the math and science students across the K-12 sector in the UAE using our platform,
Mhm.
they are as part of this category. It's not just a US initiative. We can
Mhm.
work through
Yeah.
institutions to deliver our material in the same way. And again, the
Mhm.
the the elegance of and the flexibility of working through the platform Connect rather
Yeah.
than through a print book gives us the flexibility to price in the right way, deliver content in the right
Mhm.
way, make sure professors can adjust the material very flexibly to make it just the way they want it for their course. It gives us all the
Yeah.
flexibility we need to make sure that the usability, the accessibility is higher and the
Mhm.
affordability is higher because we've lowered prices as we need to do to make sure that students are buying the material.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just so much in that around the richness of the student experience, which is, the end result of all of this in making it affordable and having more students being able to access physically. And as you said, this is across the world, and speaking on behalf of, I guess, the UK, Northern Europe, there is a lot we're doing each and every day to work with institutions, individual faculty members to discuss what do we need to do to get your students to that 90%, to using the content, and using the course material, because I can imagine there's nothing more frustrating. I'm sure the audience will agree that you put all this time, energy, effort, and if the end consumer isn't actually learning or taking anything away, it's, all of us fail. So this is almost a
Exactly.
win-win combination if we're all in it together, which we are. And I think that's a really important message to get across, that we are in it with all of you, and we're very keen to continue working. So if anyone, again, in the audience who is interested, it's not a sales pitch, I promise, but if you do want to talk to us about that, by all means feel free to drop a note in the Q&A, and we'd be more than happy to talk you through and share examples of how we've worked with others. So we are coming up to time almost, so I thought we'd look at the future and the crystal ball. And Simon, you've been here in this industry for so long, and I'm sure you're already thinking ahead. What's the next big thing? What are the next big things coming? So I guess, what do you see as the next biggest, I say challenge, but through every challenge there's always an
Mm.
opportunity. So what do you see that as being for higher education on the whole? Might be more than one, so I'll let you take it away on what you feel.
I think, Geeta, there are challenges and opportunities both, but I think
Hmm.
let's begin with the challenges because they are substantial
Yeah.
right now. I sense, and
Hmm.
again, literally hundreds of institutions I've been to over the decades, there is a growing anxiety from institutions and concern about how they motivate students, how they motivate themselves to teach students. I think the faculty job is harder than it's ever been because they're dealing with an audience that is questioning, in some cases, the relevance of higher education. That's
Yeah.
a massive
Yeah.
challenge. If your
Yeah.
core group of 18, 19, 20-year-old students, whatever it may be, if they are
Hmm.
starting to come in or maybe even choose not to go into higher education because you've seen enrollments in
Yeah.
many markets decline, that's a real
Hmm.
issue in
Hmm.
itself. But even for those that
Yeah.
do go in, how do you believe that they are getting value? And now that's what it's become. When I was at university, it was not a case of me getting value, it was me getting through the program. The value is inherent in being a graduate from a good institution with
Yeah.
a good degree. That was the value. Nowadays,
Hmm.
it's quite different. And if you think as an employer, and we employ over 4,000 people around the world, we look at skills that are required in our employees. In our case, in virtually every instance, we do require a college degree. But not every
Yeah.
position is like that. You look at tech companies nowadays, they don't have that view at all. Many tech companies like to
Hmm.
train their own. A lot of the big four accounting firms are beginning to do that. Some of the big six
Yeah.
consulting companies are doing that. So one of the biggest challenges in higher education more generally is how do we show that we are a relevant part of the employability journey, the student going through the latter stages of their education into the
Hmm.
workforce? How do we
Yeah.
demonstrate that we are relevant for that sector now? That's more
Hmm.
difficult today than it was 37 years ago. It's more difficult today than it
Yeah,
was
I agree.
13 years ago in your case. And the
Yeah.
need for institutions to show that, and it isn't just about the performance to a grade, it is that, but it's also about the experience. What too often happens is that people negate the experiences that you have being part of a university and college community and the ability to
Hmm.
engage with people at the level. If you think about the importance of critical thought and the ability to communicate your opinions, which,
Yeah.
as Gita, you know well, we must have at McGraw Hill, and every employer really
Yeah.
needs that. It's very hard to
Hmm.
get that level of maturity with staff if they've not been through a university environment and embraced and really flourished in a university environment. But it's harder to get to
hmm
that stage now for faculty than it ever has been. So the first challenge is, how do we make sure we help the whole structure of higher education embrace the student and make them realize the value proposition, because that's what it is now,
hmm
the value proposition
Yep.
of the education process they have. You've seen fees
hmm
going up in the UK, in the US, everywhere around the world, every country. The
Yep.
fees students
hmm
pay are higher. So they therefore see this as, what am I getting for this? What am I getting back out of this? There are studies that show
Yeah.
that with a degree, a university degree, they will earn X amount more over their careers than if they just have a school level performance at A level or high school in the US. And there
hmm
are studies that show that demonstrably, but there is real added value. But increasingly, students question it. We need to, McGraw Hill and all of the audience today, need to be able to show there is value in
Yep.
doing what you do at the higher education level. That's the biggest challenge.
hmm
How do we make sure we're relevant? How do we continue to entice and inspire
Yep.
and engage and motivate the student population that we all need to work with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think couldn't put it any better really around like the overall value proposition and the relevance of higher ed, which, as you said, yes, way more prominent than it ever has been.
And
And
that's the
people,
opportunity,
on
Peter,
yeah,
too. That's the
yes, yeah,
opportunity for us to make sure we do it well, to show that we
yeah,
can motivate, engage,
hmm
help students go through the process, through all of what the issues that we've
absolutely.
talked about. How do we make sure
Yeah,
that we
yeah,
do
yeah.
that well? That's our opportunity.
hmm
We know we're doing it, and we know
Yes.
we're succeeding because we've seen our own performance, which is
hmm
very, very
Yeah.
uplifting, actually. But how do we do that in
hmm
a deeper way? How do we help instructors across the
Yeah.
world recognize that value proposition from a student perspective? It's an opportunity for us, but one
Absolutely.
that we have to take very seriously.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think we're all steering some of these challenges in the face at the moment. So no, thank you so much. Thank you, Simon, for your time and all your wisdom around what you've sort of seen in the industry thus far, but where you see things headed in a direction. So we are going to end our session there. It's been an absolute pleasure to walk through all of that with you, and I hope all of you in the audience took away lots of food for thought. As I said, feel free to share any thoughts that you would like to in the chat, but equally, if you've got any questions for us that you'd like to have answered, by all means, feel free to answer those with us. We are going to end the session now, but we have got a session around, ironically, about the student preparedness, which is our next session at midday. And we'll then have our exclusive session around a very topical area, ChatGPT. I think everyone's heard about it, everyone's talking about it. So we do have an exclusive on that later this afternoon as well as a talk on sustainability, which I know is part of every core university agenda at the moment. So please do tune into those. And of course, everything's recorded. So if you can't make them, you'll be able to access them after the session. So thank you again, Simon, and thank you, everyone. And go and enjoy some coffee break and some time in the virtual booths, should you like to. So thank you, and thank you from us.